Good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to our 5th podcast. A bit of a different one this time. I'm going to talk about travel, something I've done quite a lot of. Not just up and down the country delivering parcels and pallets and God knows what else, but around the globe. There are some travel stories I've got, why I enjoy travelling, why I started travelling, and how long I've been doing it. The main reason I started travelling is because my wife made me, if I'm honest. And the first big trip I went on was for our 25th wedding anniversary, I think. That was a big trip. But another catalyst to make us travel was that the best man at my wedding, and I was best man at his wedding, in 1984 he moved to the USA. So instead of going to Europe for our holidays, we went off to the States all the time. He lived in Boston. So we did Boston, New England, up to Canada, the Falls. And then, fortunately for me, moved over to California. So the next big trip we did, which was also in the 80s, we flew in with my 4 kids. We flew into San Francisco. And on the drive from the airport, where my friend met me at the airport, to the motel he'd booked for us in San Francisco, we had a bit of an altercation and a bit of a traffic argument. And got split up for a little while. Fortunately, I managed to locate him, and then he could take us to the motel. When I got to the motel, it was just an ordinary type of motel, but I couldn't afford to lose him because I didn't even know the address of where we were staying. We did the usual things in San Francisco. Went to the Golden Gate, went to Alcatraz. I did manage to get out. They didn't keep me in, which is a bit of a surprise, but there we are. Then we took a road trip, staying at lots of different places, over the bridge, down to Carmel, and then into a place called Santa Barbara. We stayed a few nights in Santa Barbara. What a wonderful place that was. Weather was great all the time we were there. Nice and clean, lovely beaches, good food. Lots of people on bicycles and running up and down with weights in their hand on the beach. Very, very keen on keeping fit in Santa Barbara. We then moved on to a place called La Jolla, which was a very arty, nice, wonderful place. Where we had a little bit of an accident there in the beach, and one of my kids was snatched out of my hands and I nearly lost them. I did manage to get hold of her by the leg and drag her back in, but the sea in La Jolla was particularly rough. Then went on down to San Diego, went to the lovely big zoo there, had a few days there, and then we decided we'd go to Mexico because we hadn't been to Mexico. So we drove over the border. It was quite easy in those days, in the 80s, in the hired car. I don't think now they let you take hired cars into Mexico from the US. Spent the whole day there. We went to a place called Tijuana, and they had a Woolworths there and lots of other things. It was very backward compared to America. Anyway, we were out of the USA for probably 10 hours. Coming back across the border, obviously we were aliens, not US citizens, so we had to go into a separate line. Got to the counter, to the drive-thru, and the chap said, "Can I have your passports?" I said, "Well, you can, but they're in my hotel in San Diego. I put them in the safe." He said, "Well, where are you all from?" So we explained where we were all from. He looked at us, spoke to the kids in the back, said, "Okay, go through." Imagine today trying to get through from Mexico into the USA with no photographic ID. And the other thing that always puzzled me in the USA in those days, that before you bought a drink, even if you were 50, at a football match, they always ask you for a copy of your driving licence to check your age. And of course, our driving licences were all paper and had no photo or your age on it. So it used to really, really confuse them. That was one of our first trips. Another trip, we went over to Atlanta because my friend moved to Atlanta. And then we went via Texas, Houston, off to Hawaii, and we stayed in Maui for 10 days in Kahili Sands, right on the beach, and you could hear the waves bashing all night long. And there were geckos, if you know what a gecko is, like a little lizard thing, running up the wall of our condo, but instead of being about 3 inches long, these were about a foot long, and the kids found them a little bit nervy. I mean, they are harmless, and they only eat the insects, but the kids got used to them in the end because we couldn't catch them and we couldn't get them out. Then we went off to Waikiki, where 5-0 was filmed. What a place that is. I spent more in a night in Waikiki than I did in 10 days in Kahidi Sands. It's always been expensive. There was the waves, you just can't believe the waves. You can walk out for almost a mile and you can still touch the ground, but the waves, I don't know, are 4 or 5 metres high and knock you off the feet all the time. It's a fantastic place for surfers. That was really interesting. Quite an eye-opener. When we got to our 25th wedding anniversary, or must have been 3 or 4 years ago now, that's a joke, my wife decided that we needed to go on a big trip. And I had family in Australia. So we went, we took a flight to Hong Kong first. It was still a British territory in those days. And spent 2 days in Hong Kong. Then went off, flew into Melbourne, where I saw my family, my cousin that I hadn't seen for 25 years. And we had a great time in Melbourne. We were able to go camping in the Grampians, which is very interesting with all the noises and the snakes and everything else you get there. Then we went on to Sydney, a wonderful place for young people. I did say, had I been 25, I don't think I'd ever come back from Australia. I thought it was such a great place for young people. Then we went from there up to Cairns and did the Great Barrier Reef, went back into Brisbane, and then flew back into Singapore. And that was interesting because when we got to Singapore, we booked a couple of nights in Raffles Hotel, which is the nicest hotel in Singapore. Fortunately, British Airways had lost my luggage. So I'm staying in a nice restaurant with no luggage at all, a nice restaurant, nice hotel. And then I get a call from the airport. They found one of my cases. Great. 3 cases. And they delivered it to the hotel. Took great to get dressed for dinner because we were a bit scruffy. And it was the only case we had with all the dirty washing in it. So that didn't help much. But getting into the hotel was a nightmare because there was this very strange man staying there. And there were teams of teenage girls screaming, standing all around it. We had no idea who it was till we got in there. It was a man who wore a silly mask over his face called Michael Jackson. And believe it or not, at that time, he was really iconic and very famous. And he was staying there, I think, for about 3 or 4 nights. So he had the whole top floor of the hotel. And they had a lovely pool on the top, one of these endless pools that you can just swim. It looks like you're swimming off the edge of the building. But you had to go through his floor to get to it, and there were sort of bodyguards on the lift to stop you getting out. Anyway, my wife went up the stairs for, I don't know why, on her own sometime. And she gets up there and she gets approached by these like bodyguards. And he said, oh, okay, come with us, come through. And she was taken into a room where there was lots of free booze, food, recording stuff. And he said, right, but okay, we need you now. We need you up with the rest of the girls. And she said, sorry? Then he said, well, you've got to start rehearsing. She said, for what? He said, aren't you in the backing band? She said, no, I'm not in the backing band. So she sat with all the people from the backing band for a while till they turfed her out. So that was an interesting thing. But we've also done some very interesting holidays. We went to Brazil for 3 weeks. Brazil is probably one of my favourite places to go to. I stayed in Rio for a few days, had a guide. Then we went to São Paulo, Porto Alegre, and then we flew into Manaus, which is in the middle of the Mato Grosso, which is the biggest jungle upping on earth. And there we had to deposit all our belongings, bar 2 kilos of luggage was all we were allowed. And we got on a big boat that steamed up the Amazon. Now, the Amazon, you just can't see from one side to the other. It is massively wide. I think it's like 18 miles wide. We're on that boat for about 6 or 7 hours, and we watched the Black Amazon join the Brown Amazon, which is like a tributary. And it's funny because the water in the middle on one side is brown and it's black on the other. Well, we got off the big boat and got onto a tributary in like a motorboat, and we were on there for about 3 or 4 hours. We then got off that and got into a little wooden canoe, a dugout canoe, and we paddled for about an hour and a half. And we got to this place where the Amazonia Indians live, and it was no electricity, no running water, and just like these little shacks to live in. No proper toilet facilities. That was just a bucket for you. And we were there for 5 days. And when we got there, you don't understand the humidity in places like that. Everything you're wearing is soaking wet. We sort of hung it on makeshift rails. 5 days later when we left, it was still soaking wet because nothing ever dries. You wake up in the morning, your pillow's soaking wet, you're soaking wet. Your shower was a bucket on your head with a rope that you pulled over you. But we went out and did some tours. We went out at night looking for what they call caiman. They're like little crocodiles. So we go out with these flashlights. And the guys in the water, very brave, these Indian chaps, because it's full of bloody piranha. And he caught one, I guess, about 3 or 4 foot long, and he passed it into the boat, and no one wanted to touch it. Apart from my wife, who was quite happy to have it sat on her and have a photograph taken with it. That was very interesting. Then another time, they gave us another canoes, and there was like 4 of us, and you had a guide up the front, and he's canoeing like mad. And when you're in all these tributaries in the Amazon, you don't know where the hell you are. And it goes off to the right, goes off to the left. So we're in this canoe. They didn't worry about health and safety. There were no life jackets. Anyway, I'm paddling like mad to try and keep up with the guy to see where he's going. And I'm saying to my wife, why aren't you paddling? We're getting left behind. She says, got a hole in it, this boat. She says, so I'm bailing out. Do you want me to keep bailing out or paddle? I said, well, you better keep bailing out. So we eventually caught up with the rest of the team. And then we parked up and we went fishing for piranha. Now, that's always interesting because normally when you go fishing, you put a hook on a line and you put it in, you wait with a float to bob. Not when you're catching piranha. They gave you a stick with a bit of string on it and they tie a big lump of meat on it. And what you have to do, the minute you feel something on it, you have to whip it out. And we did manage to catch 3 piranha. We then sat on the shore, and there's not a lot of meat on them, big flat fish they are, and we sat and cooked them on the shore, and we ate with all the locals and ate the local things. It's very interesting because there was no beer, no TVs, no fridge, no anything, plenty of mosquitoes. Then we went for a tour through the thick jungle, and where they managed to find a tarantula spider about that size, bloody great things, in the root of a tree. And it wouldn't come out, so they were poking it with a stick to get it out. And you couldn't walk an inch in the jungle in the Amazon without someone in front of you with a machete, chopping everywhere you went. And as we went, we had people with us who were like scientists, and they would break open herbs and things, and you could smell different things that you know that are used in medicines, you know, like Vic and other bits and pieces. So that was a very interesting place. From the Amazon, we then flew back into civilization. We went to a place called Breda Forte, and that was a lovely hotel. And everything was brought to you on a donkey with sacks and things, and it was a really nice, we had a lovely veranda, which was occupied mainly by monkeys. And you definitely leave your window open, otherwise you lost everything to the monkey. So we stayed in a lovely hotel in Rio, and I happened to be staying where Pele, the great footballer, was there. And some of the people on our team interrupted him having his lunch and said, Pele, and what a gentleman. He stood up, he signed people's autographs in the middle of his dinner and was really, really polite. That was the end of our trip there, but what a great trip that was to South America. We thought the next trip we're going to go to Africa. My wife decided Africa's where we should be going. Then we went to a place called Botswana, then Mozambique, and we went on another interesting bit. We went on the Zambezi, which is a big river. And we're floating down the Zambezi, and he's got a big motor on the back, an outboard motor. And every time he sees a sign of it was full of crocodiles and other bits and animals, but every time he saw a hippo, he sped up. He said, oh, very, very dangerous hippopotamus. Very, very dangerous. Keep away from hippopotamus. Anyway, he takes us right down the Zambezi, and he sort of drops anchor right by an island. I've got it all on video. It's very, very funny. And on the island, this island's or group of islands in the middle of the Zambezi, and on it it's full of crocodiles, small elephants, big elephants, and they're washing. And it was great. We're taking all our pictures with our videos. Then on the other shore, we could see this whole troop of elephants, about 30 to 40 of them, walking down the side of the embankment and into the water and walking across the water. And they're walking and swimming or whatever they do and getting closer and closer. They ended up about 3 feet away from the boat, the raft. The raft is shaking all over the place. Once again, no life rafts, or life jackets. Not that would help. You'd probably be eaten by a crocodile or something else. And he said to us, oh, they have very bad eyesight, elephants. Keep still, everyone keep still. But the raft was shaking up and down, and as they got closer and closer, he went and locked himself in the toilet, my little guide and our security man. And the raft was tipping up and down, and you're going through your head thinking, well, if I swim to the island, I'll get eaten by a crocodile. If I get in the water, I'll probably get eaten by another crocodile. Best to push some other people in first, and while they're busy eating them, try and make a dash for the shore. So when we got back from that one, my wife decided it was time that we went to India. She had an uncle who used to have a tea plantation in India, up in the Himalayas, up in Darjeeling. So we flew into Calcutta, and we did 3 or 4 days in Calcutta. Then we took a flight up to Darjeeling. We managed to find Duncan's tea plantation, and we drove all around the Himalayas to places called Sikkim, right up high, and we stayed in the best accommodation available, which was usually somewhere with a hole in the roof, no hot running water, crappy food. But it was very, very interesting. We saw loads of things, funeral pyres. We did watch them building roads, saw bridges collapsed, and it was great. We had 2 guides. And they used to, when we were in the so-called hotel, they slept underneath the van every night, and unless it was raining, and then they would sleep inside the van. And we toured right across the Himalayas, and then we came back down to and came back to Darjeeling eventually, and flew back into Mumbai, and then went home. But we really enjoyed India. It was a really great place. So we went back again, and this time we went and did into Delhi, again a wonderful city, and did the triangle with the Red Fort. And when my wife saw the Taj Mahal at 4:30 in the morning, it brought tears to her eyes. She said she'd never seen such a beautiful building. And if you know the history of the Taj Mahal, it was built by obviously a very rich sultan, and it was in memory of his wife, who had died giving birth to her 14th child. And it's beautifully kept, immaculate inside. It's a bit of a mausoleum, but lots to see in India. Would highly recommend it, but don't expect to be living in luxury, is what I would say. We took a boat down through the Panama Canal, which was really, really interesting. Stopping at Ecuador, Venezuela, and then Buenos Aires. And then we took a flight up to Curacao, up where in Peru, where you then get a walk or a train ride to Machu Picchu. And Machu Picchu was a really wonderful place, up high in the Andes. Lots of special history, lots of architecture there. Obviously very busy, operated by a lot of people. But we did a coach and a walk. It is very high up, because the hotel we stayed in, they had special chairs with oxygen. So people who just arrived who were struggling for the air could sit and get their oxygen. And we went to Bolivia, we went to other parts of Brazil, and then we went to the Iguazu Falls. Now the Iguazu Falls make Victoria Falls in South Africa look like a puddle. They are massive and teeming and go on for miles, a sight to be held. While we were there, I said to my wife, do you fancy taking a little boat trip, a little raft trip? I said, we'll go and, because you can get close to the falls. She said, oh yes, I don't mind. What I hadn't told her was it was whitewater rafting. So as we were walking down towards where we pick up the rib, they're giving her a crash helmet, goggles, life jacket. And she said, I've never been on a trip where you need a crash helmet. And we got into this rib, and my God, did you get rocked about by the water. She smashed her goggles. I lost my sunglasses. We nearly tipped over 3 or 4 times. And I don't think she'd have chose to go on it, but afterwards she said it was a fantastic experience. And we also went to, while we were in Buenos Aires in Argentina, we went to the place where the tango was really first invented and first performed. And watching them perform the tango live with the people in white dinner jackets was again a wonderful experience. I was very impressed with Argentina. Some beautiful architecture there. People are all very nice. Lots of parks, beautiful laid out roads and streets. Really, really good. Really something to, really worth a visit. After that, I think we went to Paraguay and what's the place that borders it? Not Ukraine, say Ukraine, but it's not. Uruguay. And when we went to Uruguay, we went down the River Plate, which is another massive river. This one's 21 miles wide. You think you're in the sea. And we were lucky enough to be taken on to a trip to a ranch. They have so much beef there, and they barbecued us. Lovely big ribs and steaks. We had a tour of the ranch. On the ranch, they've got wells that just consistently run water that you can just drink out of. It's fresh mineral water that just comes out from fissures that go all the way down to the volcanic rock. And apparently it's an unlimited supply. The size of Uruguay is about the same size as the UK, but it's got 3 million people. The coldest temperature it gets to is 18 degrees, and the hottest is about 28. What a wonderful place to live that would be. Friend's 50th birthday, he wanted to do a trip to Alaska. I thought, who wants to go to Alaska? It's all cold and freezing and horrible there. He said, no, it's all right in June. I said, isn't it always dark? He said, no. So we flew into Vancouver and we spent about a week in Banff, Jasper and all those areas. Then we went to Vancouver Island. I have to say, very pretty Canada, very nice, that part of it. We then got a ship and we went up to Alaska. We were doing a tour of lots and lots of places all around Alaska, Ketchikan, Fair Oaks. I think we're 80 miles south of the the Arctic Circle. We're 80 miles south, Fairbanks it was called. So we did 4 or 5 stops. One was in Ketchikan. And when we were in Ketchikan, the day before we'd stopped somewhere else, can't remember where it was now. And we had to be back on the ship for 6 o'clock, which is fine. So we're always back on in time. 2,000 people on that ship. When we were in Ketchikan, my wife was wandering off in some shop. I was sitting reading something. And we thought, we've got to get on the ship at 6 o'clock again. And about 6:15, I'm looking for her. We go down to the port looking for the ship. It's not there. It's gone. We read the board wrong. It left at 4 o'clock that day. Now, the longest road in Alaska is 45 miles long. That's why there's more aeroplanes and small flights and planes in Alaska than there is cars. So, oh my God, my passport, all my clothes, most of my money is all on the ship. And we're sat there having a big argument about whose fault it was. And in the end, we go to the local police authority who contact the ship and the port people. And they say, right, well, what you've got to do, you've got to get a little light aircraft plane to take you to, I can't remember what the name of the place was now, somewhere else in Alaska. But you're going to arrive on an island and then you have to get a boat off an island. You're going to have to stay on the island first. Once you get on the island, you have to stay on there in a hotel, and there aren't any hotels on it. It was very interesting. So got down to the airport. They wouldn't let us go through because we had no passport. So the Homeland Security had to get hold of the ship by satellite. They confirmed who we were. Then I had a pair of shorts and 1 credit card on me and about $5. So I had to pay a lot of money for an airfare. There was a plane with seated about 4 people on it, very, really bumpy drive. But there was a lady on it who was a famous author, so famous I can't remember what her name was. But she'd been living and writing a book. And she rang a friend of hers for us, and she allowed to let us stay in a little guest house that wasn't really open. She woke her up when we got on the landed, and then she let us get on her own boat, took us over to the island, and we had no toothbrush, no anything, and we stayed in this lovely lady's house. We got there about midnight, then we got up about 7 o'clock, and then we had to get another boat off the island and get down to Shaswikin or whatever it was called, where we had to pick up the boat. When we got on the boat, we didn't get back on there till the evening, and as we walked into the dining room, we were clapped by about 1,000 people to say, well done, you're back on with us. We then spent a week touring Alaska. We had 2 days on a train with like an open roof, and then we stayed in a lodge overlooking Mount McKinley. And we went on a hunting thing with a guy called Doyle, who was like a frontiersman. We went panning for gold, and then we have a pan for gold in a river, and you have to shake it round and get it. And there was a team of about 10 of us all doing it. Most people have got no gold. I got the most gold, as you'd expect. I've still got, I'll just give it to one of my grandsons. And then we went out to do a little bit of, to his hunting lodge, and he went through and gave a reason why it's important to cull animals and shoot them and to manage the environment that you're in. And then we went to a farm. Now, if you see the size of this table, that's the size of a cauliflower or cabbage in Alaska. They are that big. Why does a cauliflower cabbage grow that big in Alaska? Does anybody know? I didn't know. Because the permafrost, nothing can put roots down further than about a foot because it's just solid ice underneath there. So on the top of the ice, it all melts, so the soil is very moist, and you have sun 23 hours a day. So everything grows massively. And on the 20th of June, they have a golf match in Alaska, and it kicks off at 5 past midnight, and it's live. Now, we were sitting in a nice, like a hotel bar overlooking Mount McKinley, and we were sat there from 8 o'clock at night. About 10 to midnight, it went dark, and at 10 past, it got light again. So it's really strange, it's light all the time. But then, of course, you get to the winter, you probably get 20 minutes of light out of all the darkness. But it was a very, very interesting place. That was a fantastic trip. I would never have thought of going to Alaska, but I'm really glad I did. And doing the land tour and the boat tour and seeing all the icebergs and all the sights there was absolutely wonderful. Another great trip I went on to was Vietnam. Vietnam's a wonderful place. It's got 90 million people. Average age of people in Vietnam is 38. It's my guide told me that it's got 3 million communist people in it and 87 million people who are capitalists. He said it's only the governments that are communists, and you can now buy most things. It's pretty westernised to me. We went to the most dangerous thing you can ever do in Vietnam is cross the road. It is non-stop scooters. They just if you dare stop, you'll get killed. You have to be brave, walk across the road, and they seem to buzz all around you and not hit you. We went to Hanoi. We went to Saigon. We went to the old American Air Base in Da Nang. We went to, I think it's called, we went down went to Gulang, where they've got the big junks. We went out on a junk for 2 nights with all the mist and the fog and all them beautiful pillars of rock, and that was good. It was a real proper old junk, and you were served delightful food and things on it. And then we went on that, trying to think of the name of the river, the massive big brown river that's there. But in Da Nang, we had the opportunity to visit the old Viet Cong bases and the underground shelters and workshops where they used to make everything. I got a chance to fire the amount of American equipment they captured. They had rows and rows of M16 rifles, and they had a firing range there. We were able to fire the M16s. They had some heavy American machine guns all from that period, and we were allowed to use them. They had tanks. They had all the little holes that they used to hide and spring up, and the dreadful booby traps they used to dig with sharp bamboo and everything else in it. But the food in Vietnam was great. The people, especially the young people, were really, really friendly and good and really nice. And we went, the thing that got me was a few years ago, everywhere we went, the Wi-Fi was wonderful and free. At the airport, it was wonderful. When you were on a coach, a guy hung up, I'd never heard of it before, one of those, called a dongle. But when I'm going back, we didn't have dongles here. He hung up this thing in the coach, and we could all get Wi-Fi everywhere. We went to some factories where they were making furniture and other bits and pieces. There were great beaches. The hotels were good. The food was wonderful. We did a tour of the American operation base in Saigon. And they still had all the radios, all the maps on the walls, all the old 1980s equipment. They had some Huey helicopters there. But there's no anti-Western feeling there. Everyone's very happy to see you and take your money and look after you. And we then went on to Cambodia, saw what the Khmer Rouge had done. And that's a very sad story, the amount of people, of his own people he killed. And we went up to Burma, and we had a good tour there as well. And that was, again, very, very interesting. And the great thing is about travel, when you speak to local people, you get to learn a bit about the history, you get to learn a lot about their own government. And I asked one of the guys in Burma, is it pretty safe? He said, oh, you're always very safe. You're never far away from someone who works for the government in the Secret Service, watching everything you do. He said, you're very, very you're very, very safe here. Yeah, just meeting people, speaking to them, seeing what their aspirations are. And it's interesting because a lot of people who live in the West think that everyone's got running water, everyone's got access to a doctor and medicine. But in lots of places in the world, they don't. But yeah, travel is a great one to broaden the mind and open your eyes. My next trip that I've got coming up is I'm off on the 9th of March. I'm going to China, doing the Terracotta Army, the Great Wall, the Forbidden Palace, Tiananmen Square. I've got 9 days in China, Shanghai. Ended up in Hong Kong, getting a boat from Hong Kong and going off to the Philippines to meet our customer services team. Having a chat with Joyce and all the girls over there. A couple of days in Manila. Then I'm off to Taiwan and then on to Japan. When I get to Japan, I'm doing both the islands all round on the ship, and then we're getting off in Tokyo and we're doing Mount Fuji, and we're doing, again, another bullet train and some other trips across Japan. And I think probably that'll be my last real distance journey. I'm then going to try and work closer to home. I've not been to Russia, and I'm very keen to go to St. Peter Square and Russia, and I haven't been to Serbia, I've been to Albania, and these are places that, I've been to Sicily, I've been to most of Europe, but I haven't been to Eastern Europe, so a bit apart from Poland. So I really fancy, now I'm getting old, that I'll just do some distance, no distance, try and keep closer to home now. Thank you for listening to some of my little holiday travels. What I would say is a lot of the places we went to, they're not safe to go to now. You couldn't do a lot of the things we did then. Today. So you have to be very careful today before you travel anywhere. I've just heard about 2 people being arrested in Iran. You really need to take a lot of care before you go anywhere exotic. So it's very kind of you all to listen to my little travel tales, and I hope I haven't bored you too much. Speak to you soon.